So there I was, Dr. Maya Torres, floating somewhere between the Andromeda Spiral and my last shred of sanity aboard the luxury cruise ship Cosmic Pause. And yes, that's really what they called it. Apparently, when you're the premier intergalactic transportation service for alien cubs, subtlety goes right out the airlock along with your dignity. I'd saved up 3 years of vacation time for this trip. 3 years of dealing with cranky cats, neurotic parrots, and the occasional iguana with an attitude problem. All so I could spend 2 weeks doing absolutely nothing while floating through the most beautiful nebulae in known space. My biggest concern was supposed to be whether to order the Rigelian fruit cocktail or the Tau Cetian wine with dinner. Instead, I found myself staring at a very nervous-looking Captain Blix, whose 4 eyes were doing that thing where they independently rotated in different directions. Never a good sign when you're dealing with a Zentorian. "Dr. Torres," he said, wringing all 6 of his hands in what I'd learned was their equivalent of a panic attack. "We have what you humans might call a situation." I took another sip of my coffee, real Earth coffee that cost more than my monthly rent back home, and raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, the shuffleboard tournament got too competitive?" "Our ship Veterinarian, Dr. Clendathu, has fallen mysteriously ill," Captain Blix continued, completely missing my attempt at humor. "Aliens, I swear. She's been sedated in the medical bay, and we need immediate replacement." "Captain, I'm a veterinarian for Earth animals. You know, dogs, cats, the occasional exotic bird. I don't know the first thing about treating alien species. But you are still a doctor of animal medicine, yes?" I gestured around the observation lounge where we were sitting. Through the massive viewport, I could see other passengers lounging by the zero-gravity pool, sipping drinks that changed color every few seconds, living their best lives while I was apparently about to become the ship's emergency vet. Technically, yes, but... "Excellent." Captain Blix's relief was so palpable I could practically taste it in the recycled air. "You see, we have a very special cargo aboard Cosmic Pause." Oh, this was going to be good. I could feel my vacation slipping away faster than a greased Venusian salamander. "How special are we talking?" 200 cubs from 47 different species, all being transported to the Galactic Academy for Advanced Learning on Kepler Station. I nearly choked on my coffee. 200 baby aliens, and you want me to be their doctor? Them may are the offspring of very important dignitaries, ambassadors and business leaders from across the galaxy, Captain Blix explained, his voice rising in pitch with each word. "Some are worth more than entire star systems in terms of diplomatic importance. And their regular vet just happened to get sick right now. Dr. Clendathu was found this morning in her quarters, laughing uncontrollably and running a high fever. Our medical scanner indicates she has contracted something called giggle plague." I blinked. "I'm sorry, did you just say giggle plague?" "It is a rare but highly contagious disease that affects most carbon-based life forms. Symptoms include uncontrollable laughter, fever, and eventual collapse from exhaustion. And you think I should get anywhere near this?" Captain Blix's 4 eyes finally synchronized, all focusing on me with desperate intensity. "Humans appear to have natural immunity to most known pathogens. Your species' immune system is, frankly, terrifyingly robust." Well, that was both flattering and mildly insulting. "So you want me to risk exposure to an alien plague to treat 200 sick baby aliens using medical knowledge I don't possess?" "The cubs are not yet sick," Captain Blix said quickly. "But given the confined space and the contagious nature of the disease, it is only a matter of time." I stood up, pacing to the viewport where I could see the vast emptiness of space stretching in all directions. No convenient planetary hospitals out here. No backup. No escape. "What exactly do you expect me to do if they do get sick?" "Whatever you humans do," Captain Blix said with touching faith in my abilities. "We have heard stories of your species' medical capabilities, how you save creatures others consider lost causes." "Those are just stories, Captain." "Are they? Then explain how humans have managed to keep creatures alive that should have died out eons ago. Your zoos, your conservation efforts, your veterinary medicine. You perform what other species consider miracles." I turned back to face him and I could see he genuinely believed what he was saying. The problem was, I wasn't sure I did. That's when Bert, the ship's AI, chimed in with his insufferably cheerful voice. "Dr. Torres, I should mention that according to Galactic Maritime Law, Section 847B, any qualified medical professional aboard a vessel in crisis is required to assist in medical emergencies." "I'm on vacation, Bert." "Vacation status does not supersede emergency medical protocols, I'm afraid. Also, would you like me to play some relaxing music while you consider your options? I have an extensive collection of Earth elevator music from the 1970s. I rub my temples, feeling a headache coming on. What happens if I say no? Captain Blix's shoulders sagged. Then we maintain quarantine until we reach the nearest starbase with proper medical facilities. That would be approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks trapped on a ship with 200 potentially sick alien babies, and a crew that thinks I'm some kind of miracle worker. When you put it like that, Bear chimed in helpfully, it does sound rather challenging, doesn't it? I looked out at the stars again, then back at Captain Blick's hopeful expression. Somewhere below us, 200 little aliens were going about their day, completely unaware that their lives might soon depend on a human vet who specialized in house cats and had never seen most of their species before. All right, I said finally, but I'm going to need a very large bottle of that Regalian whiskey from the bar, and I want hazard pay. Captain Blick's relief was so intense I thought he might start crying. Of course, anything you need. And if we all die horribly from alien plague, I'm haunting this ship for eternity. Noted, Bert said brightly. Should I add that to the ship's permanent record? This was definitely not how I'd planned to spend my vacation. Captain Blix led me through the ship's corridors, toward what he optimistically called the medical bay. Along the way, I got my first real look at the crew I'd be working with, and let me tell you, it was about as confidence-inspiring as a chocolate teapot. First up was First Officer Grok, who intercepted us at the first intersection with the urgency of someone who'd just discovered fire. He was roughly 7 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted from green to purple when he got excited, and apparently had the Galactic Regulations Manual surgically implanted in his brain. Captain Blix, Grok announced, consulting a tablet the size of a dinner plate. According to Regulation 466C, subsection 12, all medical personnel must complete a 17-page safety briefing before beginning duties aboard a Class A passenger vessel. Grok, Captain Blix said patiently, we're in an emergency situation, which is precisely why Regulation 923FF mandates additional safety protocols, sir. Dr. Torres will need to complete Forms 27B through 94J, pass a basic ship safety examination, and undergo a psychological evaluation to ensure she can handle the stress of emergency medical care. I stared at him. How long would that take? Approximately 14 hours, assuming you pass all sections on the first attempt. Rock, I said slowly. People could die. His scales went full purple. Which is why we have regulations, Dr. Torres. Structure prevents chaos. Order ensures survival. Without proper protocols, we're just sophisticated animals flailing around in space. We're already sophisticated animals flailing around in space, I pointed out. Before Grok could launch into what I sensed would be a lengthy lecture on the philosophical importance of bureaucracy, we were interrupted by what sounded like a small explosion from the engineering section, followed by a stream of the most creative alien profanity I'd ever heard. That would be Chief Engineer Pip, Captain Blix said apologetically. We found Pip in the engineering bay, which looked like someone had crossed a coffee shop with a nuclear reactor and then hit it with a tornado. She was about 3 feet tall, covered in fur that stood on end like she'd been electrocuted, and moved with the manic energy of someone who'd mainlined pure caffeine. "Captain!" she squeaked, not looking up from whatever mechanical disaster she was elbow-deep in. "The medical bay's life support systems are running on backup power because the primary coupling decided to have what I can only describe as a mechanical nervous breakdown. I've got it jury-rigged with spare parts from the coffee machine, but it's about as stable as a caffeinated squirrel on a trampoline." "Is it safe?" I asked. Pip finally looked at me, her large eyes going even wider. "Safe is a relative concept in engineering. It's safer than not having life support at all, which is the alternative we're working with here. How long until you can fix it properly?" "Well, that depends on whether you want me to fix it right or fix it fast. Because in engineering, just like with coffee, you can have it good, fast, or cheap, but never all three. What if we need it to be good and fast? Then we're looking at what I like to call a grade A mechanical miracle, which typically requires either divine intervention or really, really good coffee, and we're currently out of both." I was starting to understand why Captain Blix looked like he aged 10 years every time someone spoke to him. Our next stop was the communications center, where I met Officer Zara, and immediately wished I hadn't. She was humanoid, mostly, except for the pale blue skin, and the fact that she never quite seemed to be looking at you when she talked. "Dr. Torres," she said before we'd even been introduced, "you're wondering if this entire crew is completely incompetent, worried about the cubs you haven't even met yet, and questioning why you didn't just become a nice, safe human doctor instead of a veterinarian. I stopped walking. How did you? I'm telepathic, Zara explained, finally making eye contact. Which sounds like a useful ability until you realize that most people's thoughts are either incredibly boring or deeply disturbing, and there's no in-between. And you turn it off. About as easily as you can turn off your ability to see or hear. Right now you're thinking that this complicates things, wondering if I can read the cub's thoughts, and also you're really concerned about that weird noise the life support system is making. She was right on all counts, including the life support noise, which I was now acutely aware of. The cub's thoughts are interesting, Zara continued. 47 different species means 47 different ways of thinking. Some think in colors, some in mathematical equations, and the Andromedan cubs think entirely in what I can only describe as emotional textures. It's like having a symphony orchestra made up of kazoos and opera singers all performing different songs at the same time. Sounds horrible. You get used to it. The real problem is that I can't help but overshare what I'm picking up. For instance, right now Captain Blix is thinking about how his career will be over if anything happens to these cubs. Grok is mentally composing a 12-page report about regulation violations, and Pip is wondering if she can brew coffee using the ship's antimatter containment system. Please tell me she's not actually going to try that. Oh, she's definitely going to try that. Finally, we reached the medical bay, where Bert's voice greeted us with insufferable cheerfulness. Welcome to the medical bay, Dr. Torres. I've taken the liberty of preparing a comprehensive overview of your new patients, organized by species, age, dietary requirements, and likelihood of biting, scratching, or secreting defensive toxins. That's actually helpful, Bert. I've also programmed myself with every Earth comedy routine from 1950 to 1985 in case humor therapy is required. Did you hear the one about the chicken who crossed the road? Please, no. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Comedy gold, isn't it? I looked around at my new crew. Grok was already filling out forms. Pip was trying to caffeinate herself using what appeared to be engine coolant. Zara was staring into space with the expression of someone listening to a particularly annoying radio station she couldn't turn off. And Bert was probably loading up more jokes from the Eisenhower administration. This is my medical team? I asked Captain Blix. They're enthusiastic, he offered weakly. They're insane. In my experience, Captain Blix said, with the wisdom of someone who'd been managing this chaos for years. Insane and enthusiastic often produce the best results. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? That's when the ship's alarms started blaring, and Bert announced in his perpetually cheerful voice, "Attention all crew and passengers. We have detected our first case of giggle plague among the cubs. Please report to emergency stations and try not to panic. And remember, laughter is the best medicine, except when it's literally killing you." I sighed and rolled up my sleeves. All right, people, let's go save some alien babies. The first thing you need to understand about alien cubs is that they're all adorable in completely different and terrifying ways. The second thing is that when they're sick, they're still adorable, which makes everything infinitely worse because you can't help but want to fix them, even when you have absolutely no idea how. I followed the sound of uncontrollable giggling to Nursery Bay 7, where I found a small Rigelian cub about the size of a golden retriever puppy, except covered in what looked like rainbow-colored fur and sporting 6 legs and a tail that glowed. She was rolling around on the floor, laughing so hard she could barely breathe, while 3 adult Rigelians, who I assumed were the caretakers, stood around looking helpless. "How long has she been like this?" I asked. 2 hours, one of the caretakers replied in heavily accented standard. "Started with small giggles during breakfast, now she cannot stop." I knelt down next to the little cub, and she immediately tried to nuzzle my hand while continuing to giggle uncontrollably. Her temperature was definitely elevated, and I could see she was starting to get exhausted. "Elbert," I called out, "what do we know about Rigelian physiology?" "Rigelians are silicon-based life forms with a dual circulatory system and 3 hearts, Bert announced helpfully. They're normally quite serious creatures, rarely displaying humor except during mating rituals. Which means that giggling is definitely not normal. Correct. Also, did you know that Rigelians consider knock-knock jokes to be the height of sophisticated comedy? Not helping, Bert. I tried to examine the cub more thoroughly, but my human medical training was hitting its limits. I knew how to check a dog's temperature, but this little one had what appeared to be 2 different types of pulse points and skin that changed color based on her emotional state. "Dr. Torres," Grok's voice came over the comm system. I need to report that we now have 17 cubs showing early symptoms of giggle plague across 12 different species. Also, according to Regulation 2334H, we should implement Containment Protocol 7 immediately. What's Containment Protocol 7? All affected individuals must be isolated in individual quarantine units until symptoms subside. Grok, these are babies. They'll be terrified alone. Regulation clearly states... The regulation can take a long walk out the airlock, I snapped. We're not separating sick children from their caretakers. That's when Captain Blick's voice joined the conversation, and he sounded about 3 steps away from a complete nervous breakdown. Dr. Torres, I've been in contact with Galactic Health Services. They're recommending immediate evacuation of all cubs to the nearest medical facility. How long would that take? 6 weeks minimum. And they want us to jettison any affected individuals in escape pods to prevent further spread. I stood up so fast I nearly knocked over one of the Regalian caretakers. They want us to what? It's standard quarantine protocol for unknown pathogens. Captain, if you suggest putting sick babies in escape pods one more time, I'm going to jettison you instead. While we were having this delightful conversation, Pip's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. Folks, I hate to interrupt this ethical dilemma, but we've got bigger problems. The medical bay's environmental systems just decided to throw a mechanical tantrum of epic proportions. Define tantrum, I said, dreading the answer. Well, the good news is that life support is still working. The bad news is that the atmospheric processors are now calibrated for optimal Andromedan breathing, which means the oxygen levels are about 30% higher than most species can handle. What does that mean exactly? It means everyone's going to be slightly lightheaded and giddy, which probably won't help with the whole uncontrollable laughter situation. As if to prove her point, I suddenly felt a wave of dizziness and found myself fighting back an inappropriate urge to giggle. Around me, the Regalian caretakers were starting to look distinctly less professional. Pip, how long to fix it? That depends on whether the backup atmospheric regulator decides to cooperate, or if it's going to join its buddy in mechanical rebellion. Right now, it's looking like the latter. Which means we're all going to be breathing concentrated comedy air until I can convince these systems that we're not actually trying to throw a ship-wide party. That's when Zara's voice joined our increasingly chaotic conversation. Dr. Torres, you need to know that I'm picking up distress signals from cubs all over the ship. The telepathic species are especially affected because they can sense each other's symptoms, which is creating a feedback loop of panic and laughter. How many are we talking about? 43 cubs now showing symptoms, and the number is climbing fast. Also, Captain Blix is thinking about calling his mother to tell her he loves her, which suggests he thinks we're all going to die. I am not thinking about calling my mother, Captain Blix protested. You were 30 seconds ago, now you're thinking about whether your life insurance covers death by alien plague. Meanwhile, Bert chimed in with his trademark inappropriate timing. Dr. Torres, I've been analyzing the symptoms and I believe I've identified the problem. Finally, some good news. What is it? The cubs aren't just sick, they're homesick. The giggle plague appears to be a psychosomatic response to stress and separation anxiety, amplified by the ship's recycled air system and close quarters. I stared at the little Regalian cub, who was still giggling but now looked absolutely exhausted. You're telling me they're literally laughing themselves sick because they miss home? In layman's terms, yes. It's like a nervous breakdown but with more giggling and less crying. And you're just telling me this now? I wanted to be sure of my analysis. Also, I've been trying to think of appropriate jokes to cheer everyone up, but most of my comedy routines involve chickens crossing roads, which doesn't seem culturally relevant to our current situation. At this point, I could feel my own stress levels climbing toward the danger zone. The ship was filling with sick alien babies. My crew consisted of a regulation-obsessed reptile, a caffeinated engineer who thought antimatter and coffee were interchangeable, a telepathic oversharer, and an AI programmed with vaudeville routines from the Truman administration. All right, everyone listen up, I announced over the comm system. We're going to treat this like any other veterinary emergency. We need to stop the spread, treat the symptoms, and address the underlying cause. But Dr. Torres, Grok interjected, the regulations clearly state that in cases of unknown pathogens, Grok, I need you to take your regulations and use them to help organize treatment areas. Can you do that? Well, Regulation 156B does cover emergency triage procedures. Perfect. Pip, I need you to fix the atmospheric system and then help me jury-rig some medical equipment for species I've never seen before. Can do. But I should mention that the coffee machine is definitely broken now, so I'll be running on pure adrenaline and engineering spite. Zara, you're going to be my translator and emotional support coordinator. If these cubs are homesick, we need to make them feel safe. Roger that. Also, you should know that several of the caretakers are starting to panic, and one of them is considering mutiny. Bert, I need you to compile everything we know about treating separation anxiety and stress responses across different species. Absolutely. And should I prepare some jokes to lighten the mood? Only if you want to end up as spare parts for Pip's repairs. I looked down at the little Rigelian cub, who had finally stopped giggling but was now whimpering softly. Around the ship, I could hear similar sounds echoing from other nursery bays. 43 sick alien babies, a crew that belonged in a comedy sketch, and me with exactly 0 experience in interspecies pediatric medicine. You know what? I said to no one in particular. I should have become a dentist. Here's the thing about being a veterinarian that most people don't understand. We don't just treat one species like human doctors do. We treat hundreds of them, each with completely different anatomy, physiology, and psychological needs. A parrot thinks differently than a python, which thinks differently than a porcupine. And somehow, we're expected to figure out what's wrong and fix it, often with patients who can't tell us where it hurt. Which meant that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as screwed as I thought. I made my way back to the medical bay, stepping over Pip, who was apparently trying to rewire something while hanging upside down from a ceiling panel. The atmospheric system had finally stabilized, which meant I could think clearly for the first time in an hour. Ellard, I called out, show me everything we know about the affected species. Not just medical data, behavioral patterns, social structures, anything that might explain why they're all responding the same way to stress. Certainly. Displaying comprehensive files now. I should mention that 17 of the affected species are pack animals, 12 form complex family units, and 8 are what humans might classify as highly social creatures, requiring constant companionship. I studied the data streaming across the medical bay's main display. Rigelians travel in family pods. Centaurian cubs never leave their parents' sight until adulthood. Andromedan young communicate through shared emotional experiences. They were all social species, and they'd all been separated from their families and thrust into an unfamiliar environment. It's not just homesickness, I murmured. It's social isolation anxiety. Come again? Captain Blix asked, joining me in the medical bay with the expression of someone who'd aged a decade in the past few hours. Think about it. These cubs were taken from their families, put on a ship with strangers, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds, smells, and experiences. Their stress response is triggering a cascade reaction that's manifesting as uncontrollable laughter. But why laughter? Same reason humans sometimes laugh when they're nervous or scared. It's a stress response, but in a confined space with compromised air systems and 47 different species all feeding off each other's anxiety, it's gone haywire. Grok's voice crackled over the comm. Dr. Torres, Regulation 445 of C states that psychological treatment falls under the jurisdiction of certified mental health professionals, not veterinarians. Grok, I've been doing behavioral therapy for animals my entire career. A neurotic cat isn't that different from a homesick alien. They just have different numbers of legs. I hardly think you can compare. Can I interrupt this fascinating discussion? Zara's voice cut in. Because I'm getting some very interesting thoughts from the cubs right now. They're not just scared, they're confused. They can sense that the adults around them are panicking, which is making everything worse. That gave me an idea. A completely insane, probably dangerous, definitely against regulations idea. What if we stop treating this like a medical emergency and start treating it like a behavioral problem? Explain, Captain Blix said warily. I started pacing, my mind racing through everything I knew about animal psychology. When I get a dog with separation anxiety, I don't just medicate it. I create a safe environment, establish routines, provide comfort items. Sometimes I even use scent therapy or calming sounds. These aren't dogs, Dr. Torres. No, but they're social creatures, experiencing anxiety in an unfamiliar environment. The principles are the same. Pip's voice echoed from wherever she was still hanging upside down. I hate to interrupt this breakthrough moment, but the medical bay's equipment was designed for adult aliens with standard physiology. We've got cubs ranging from the size of hamsters to the size of ponies, with everything from exoskeletons to gelatinous bodies to what I can only describe as living crystals. Then we improvise. Improvise how? I looked around the medical bay, taking inventory. Standard alien medical equipment designed for beings roughly humanoid in size and shape. But in the corner, I spotted something interesting. Pip, What's that fabrication unit used for? Emergency equipment repairs mostly. It can create basic tools and components using ship's materials. Can it create other things, like comfort items, toys, environmental modifications? I suppose, but... And you said you can jury-rig heating and cooling systems? Sure, but what are you thinking? I turned to face the group, and I could see Captain Blick's expression shifting from desperation to something that might have been hope. We create species-specific comfort environments. Rigelians need warm, humid conditions and the sound of their family pods. Centaurians require low light and soft surfaces. Andromedans need emotional residence, which Zara might be able to provide. That's... Captain Blick started, then stopped. That's actually not completely insane. It gets better. We organize the crew into specialized teams. Grok, your regulations obsession might actually be useful for once. These cubs need structure and routine, right? You can create schedules, organize activities, make them feel like there's order in their world. Grok's scales shifted to what I was learning was his thinking color. Regulation 28F does outline proper procedures for maintaining scheduled activities during extended voyages. Pip, I need you to modify medical equipment for pediatric use and create environmental controls for different species requirements. I can work with that, though I should mention that without coffee, my engineering might get a little creative. Zara, you're going to be our emotional support coordinator. If you can sense their feelings, you can help us know what's working and what isn't. Already picking up some interest from the cubs, the little Rigelian you examined earlier is curious about what you're planning. Yes, Dr. Torres? You said you have comedy routines from the 1950s to 1985? Complete archives, though I should warn you that most of them involve outdated cultural references and questionable social attitudes. What about children's programming, educational content, lullabies? I have extensive files on human child development and entertainment, though again mostly Earth-centered. Perfect. We adapt them, create multi-species entertainment that might help calm them down. Captain Blix was staring at me like I'd just proposed building a rocket ship out of spare napkins. Dr. Torres, you're suggesting we turn my luxury cruise ship into a combination daycare center, hospital, and psychological treatment facility. I'm suggesting we treat the cause instead of just the symptoms. These cubs don't need advanced alien medicine. They need what any scared child needs. Safety, comfort, routine, and the knowledge that someone cares about them. But you're human, Captain Blix pointed out. You don't understand their cultures, their needs, their... Captain, I've spent my career figuring out what animals need to feel safe and healthy. I've treated everything from anxious parrots to depressed dolphins to traumatized rescue dogs. The species change, but fear is universal. Loneliness is universal. The need for comfort and security is universal. Zara's voice came over the comm with what sounded like surprise. Dr. Torres, I'm getting much calmer thoughts from several of the cubs. Just talking about helping them seems to be having an effect. Because they can sense that we have a plan, that someone knows what to do. I looked around at my unlikely team. Grok was already pulling up regulations that might apply to childcare protocols. Pip was sketching modifications to medical equipment on her tablet. Captain Blix looked like he was either going to promote me or have me arrested for mutiny. So, I said, are we going to save these kids or are we going to let them laugh themselves to death while we follow procedures? Captain Blix was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened up, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked like someone who actually belonged in a captain's uniform. Dr. Torres, you have full authority to implement whatever treatment plan you think necessary. What do you need? I grinned. I need everyone to forget that I'm just a human vet who's supposed to be on vacation. Because for the next few days, I'm the closest thing these cubs have to a miracle worker. And Bert, I added, find me everything you have on interspecies lullabies. We're gonna sing these babies to sleep if it's the last thing we do. What followed was either the most organized medical operation in galactic history or the most chaotic daycare center ever assembled. Honestly, it was hard to tell the difference. Pip worked miracles with spare parts and engineering spite. She rigged heating lamps from emergency flares, created soft nesting areas using cargo padding, and somehow convinced the ship's fabrication unit to produce what looked like alien pacifiers. Her piece de resistance was jury-rigging the environmental controls to create microclimates in each nursery bay. I've got tropical swamp conditions for the Rigelians, Arctic cave simulation for the Centaurians, and something I'm calling cosmic forest ambiance for the tree-dwelling species, she announced proudly. It's not perfect, but it beats sterile ship air. Brock transformed into the universe's most unlikely nursery coordinator. He created schedules with military precision, organized feeding rotations, and somehow made bureaucracy soothing. Cubs who had been giggling hysterically began to calm down when he announced mealtimes and recreation periods with the same solemnity most people reserved for state funerals. "Attention all cubs in Nursery Bay 4, he would intone seriously. "According to Daily Schedule Protocol 7, it is now time for structured play activities, followed by nutritional supplementation at exactly 1400 hours. The cubs loved it. Apparently, when you're scared and confused, having someone announce that there's a plan for everything is incredibly comforting. Zara became our emotional early warning system and the world's most unusual therapist. She could sense anxiety spikes before they became giggling fits and redirect the cub's attention to calming activities. She also discovered that several telepathic species could share comforting thoughts and memories, creating what she called a mobile emotional support network. The Andromedan cubs are broadcasting memories of home to the other telepathic species, she reported. It's like they're sharing virtual hugs across language barriers. Bert surprised everyone by becoming a hit with the entertainment programming. His collection of ancient Earth children's songs, when adapted for different species' hearing ranges, created a ship-wide lullaby system that seemed to work across cultures. Who knew that Twinkle Twinkle Little Star would be universally appealing when translated into subsonic frequencies for the rock-based species, he mused cheerfully. And me? I worked around the clock, running from nursery to nursery with my improvised medical kit, treating everything from dehydration to exhaustion to what I could only describe as acute homesickness. I learned to take pulse readings from beings with 6 different circulatory systems, administered fluids to creatures whose biology defied everything I thought I knew about medicine, and somehow managed to provide comfort to scared children whose emotional expressions I couldn't even recognize. The turning point came 18 hours into our improvised treatment plan. The little Rigelian cub who'd been our first patient had stopped giggling entirely and was now purring contentedly in her modified environment, surrounded by the sounds of home and the warmth she needed. "Dr. Torres, Captain Blix found me in Nursery Bay 12, where I was checking on a group of crystalline cubs who chimed softly when they breathed. The infection rate has dropped to 0, no new cases in the past 6 hours. And the existing patients? Recovery rate is at 80% and climbing." I slumped against the wall, suddenly feeling every hour of sleep I'd missed. "We actually did it." "You actually did it," Captain Blix corrected, using nothing but human intuition and the most unlikely medical team in the galaxy. "Hey," Pip's voice crackled over the comm, "I prefer creatively resourceful to unlikely. I think we prefer highly effective despite violating at least 47 regulations," Grok added with what might have been pride. "The cubs are broadcasting feelings of safety and contentment," Zara reported. "It's actually quite lovely, like being surrounded by the emotional equivalent of warm sunshine." I looked around the nursery bay, where 200 alien cubs were finally sleeping peacefully, each in their own specially designed comfort zone, with soft music playing and the gentle hum of properly functioning life support systems. "Albert," I called softly, not wanting to wake anyone, "remind me to never complain about treating regular Earth animals again." "Shall I add that to your permanent medical record, Dr. Torres?" "Just add that humans are apparently pretty good at figuring things out when they have to." 48 hours later, every single cub had made a full recovery. The ship was still organized like the galaxy's most elaborate nursery, but now it was filled with healthy, happy alien children who had somehow decided that humans were pretty all right. The Galactic Medical Council called while I was teaching a group of Centaurian cubs how to play what I optimistically called interspecies tag. "Dr. Torres," the council representative said, appearing on the main screen with the kind of expression usually reserved for discovering new laws of physics. "We've reviewed your treatment protocols, and we're, frankly, astounded." "It wasn't that complicated," I replied, gently untangling myself from what appeared to be a living vine that was enthusiastically trying to hug my leg. "They just needed to feel safe. You've been offered positions at 17 different medical facilities, including the Andromedan Institute for Advanced Healing and the Rigelian Medical Academy. That's very flattering, but I'm actually looking forward to getting back to my regular practice. Earth dogs are much less complicated than homesick alien children." Captain Blix stepped forward with something that might have been a smile. "Dr. Torres has been offered permanent passage on Cosmic Pause as our chief medical officer, with full accommodations and a salary that would make a Ferengi weep with envy." And I politely declined that too. I just want to finish my vacation. The cubs had other ideas about my departure. The farewell ceremony involved 200 alien children expressing gratitude in 47 different ways. I was sung to, chittered at, telepathically hugged, and covered in what I hoped were affectionate secretions from species I still couldn't properly identify. The little Rigelian cub who'd started it all presented me with what appeared to be a scale from her tail that glowed softly in my palm. According to her caretaker, it was the highest honor a Rigelian could bestow. "Well," Captain Blix said as we watched the cubs disembark at their destination, healthy and happy and ready for their new adventure. "I suppose I owe you an apology, Dr. Torres. And my crew." "For what?" "For assuming that humans couldn't handle galactic medicine. You saved 200 lives with nothing but improvisation and stubbornness." "Don't forget the crew," I said, watching Grok organize the disembarkation with regulation-perfect precision while Pip made sure all her jury-rigged equipment was properly documented for future use. Turns out weird works pretty well when you're dealing with an impossible situation. "The cubs will remember this," Zara added, still picking up residual thoughts of contentment and gratitude from the departing children. "Some of them are already planning to become doctors themselves, because of what they experienced here." Bert chimed in cheerfully. "Dr. Torres, you've inspired a new generation of medical professionals and proven that human veterinary techniques have universal applications. Also, would you like to hear a joke about a chicken crossing the road?" "Bert, if you tell that joke one more time, I'm having Pip reprogram you with nothing but elevator music." "Noted. Though I should mention that elevator music from the 1970S is actually quite soothing." 3 days later, I was finally back in the observation lounge, sipping that ridiculously expensive Earth coffee and watching nebulae drift past the viewport. My vacation was nearly over and I'd spent most of it working, but somehow, I didn't mind. That's when my personal communicator chimed with an incoming emergency medical consultation request from a cargo ship carrying a load of sick Venusian salamanders. I looked at the communicator, sighed dramatically, and smiled. "Dr. Torres speaking. What seems to be the problem?" After all, somebody had to keep the galaxy's animals healthy, and apparently that somebody was me.